you for joining us for another edition of Crewing the Ship with the Save Ancient Studies Alliance. This week we're featuring, or this month, I'm sorry, we're featuring Zylla's Athenaeum, featuring Zylla Black, and hosted by myself, Cassandra May. Just a little bit about SASA and what we do as per usual. The Save Ancient Studies Alliance, we work to promote the study of the ancient world and engagement with our human deeper past, building a grassroots movement through outreach, collaboration, accessibility, and public scholarship. We work toward our goal of inspiring a wide, inclusive community of scholars, learners, and students. You can find us on all of your major social media platforms by simply searching Save Ancient Studies. Our live event protocol. We just ask that you please be kind and respectful, listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. Feel free to put them in the chat and we'll read them out if we have time. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. And our live events are all live streamed on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and still Twitter for now. The recordings will be posted on above platforms shortly after the event. And have fun. If you do like what we do here, our live events, archeo gaming, book clubs, reading groups, please consider becoming a supporter of SASA with a recurring monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us save ancient studies. Just go to saveancientstudies.org/donate to learn more, or scan that little QR code in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. I can talk, I promise, and it will take you straight there. And lastly, thank you for joining us. Right, so it's great to have you on again, Zylla. For people who may not know much about your project, who may have missed our last stream where we went more in depth about it, can you just share a bit more about what you do with them?
Of course. So my name is Zylla. I run a YouTube channel called Zylla's Athenaeum, and I do a number of projects related to ancient studies and leftist politics. And I do some deep dives on historical linguistics, that sort of thing. So on my main channel, I have, like on YouTube, I have everything from, 10-minute sort of discussions of fun little linguistic facts all the way up to hour-long video essays on important topics. And I also do streaming on Twitch at Zillable, like syllable, but with a Z. And that's where I do my ancient gaming streams. So every Saturday, or almost every Saturday, I play video games with ancient studies content, and I talk about that.
Great, yeah. And for anyone interested, you can follow Zylla. I have a QR code I'll put up here for a bit of the stream. People can scan it. It takes you straight to their YouTube page. So let's see. I was looking at your projects and what you're working on right now, or in the most recent month or so, and I saw you started working on something called Praxis Town Projects. Can you go into that a bit and how that relates to ancient studies, or can relate to ancient studies?
Sure. So people have always been social animals from every historical and archaeological record we have found. We can tell that people are always interconnected and supporting each other. The Praxis Town project, so that's part of an activism collective called Praxis Town. So it's a bunch of other creators, YouTubers, podcasters, who are all just trying to do their part to make the world a better place. It isn't necessarily connected to ancient studies, but it is something that any viewer can take a couple of minutes and go do on their own time. So we've had projects that are like, look up who's on your local school board, or find out if there's a mutual aid group in your area that you could join. And you don't necessarily have to join, but even just knowing about these things can really improve your connection to your community and give you the means to reach out and, be a force for good in the world.
Absolutely. I watched your video on the school boards in particular because I'm a mom of two and not really involved in the school boards, but it is so important to know what's going on, not only if you have children, as you said, but just in general.
Yeah.
They're the next generation. We need to know
Our
what's going on.
schools are in many ways under attack by people who don't want people to be educated about their own history and the context of the world that we live in. They don't want people who know how to critically think and criticize their policies. We can see that, with what's going on in places like Florida and Texas. And you can see that, there are plenty of videos of right-wing activists like Matt Walsh just wandering into random school board meetings to fearmonger about trans people, about what is it this week, furries one week, I think it was.
Oh.
And like it's nonsensical, but it does have an effect when people don't understand what's happening.
Hmm.
And so it's really important to find out what people in your area are saying and what they understand about what's happening. Um, and this is really applicable, especially to the teaching of history, because people like bigots love to say that like everything they don't like is new, is invented. But let me tell you, trans people, intersex people have existed for as long as we have records. And like this is one of those things that I just I just want to shove a classical statue of Hermaphroditus in people's faces. you know um Go look that up if you're watching. It's
Hmm.
distinctive. It's very famous for a reason. But that's it's hardly the only example, just a really easy one. And so like it's really important to actually teach history, to teach real history to the best of our ability, just to show people that it isn't new. It's just how humans have always been.
Exactly. And recognizing that history can change and interpretations can change. And that's important to educate people on as we move through things and find new evidence.
Yeah, our knowledge is never static.
Exactly.
There's no way to know everything about a subject, but we can revise what we know when we get more information. And it also depends on what you're willing to acknowledge and look for. Like there was a long period, which I get very worked up about this, but there's a long period where there were people who were just like, oh no, Sappho wasn't a lesbian. She couldn't have been a lesbian. That
Mhm.
would be terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so she just was writing from the perspective of men, even though she's using female pronouns for
Mhm.
herself. Or it's a metaphor for students or something. Like, you get people who claiming all sorts of random things, less reliable than the Suda, which, if you're not familiar, the Suda is a Byzantine encyclopedia that takes like comedies as a good source of documentable information. And if you've ever seen SNL, you can tell exactly how bad that's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it like we can just acknowledge now that it's
Mhm.
safe, and we can preserve we say yes, Sappho was a lesbian and her poetry was beautiful and it's worth preserving on its own merits, and we don't have to reject it just because she liked other women. Like
Yes.
that's a thing that changed over time, multiple times.
Yes. Resounding yes. I wish I had chosen like a graphic, just big red letters. Yes. And I put it right over it. So, well, I guess we'll pivot a bit. I also saw that you were currently playing Stray Gods, which,
Yes.
oh my God, I love it.
It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I love this game.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I do too.
I'm only about halfway through it.
I'm only about an hour in because of limited time, but what I've played so far, I really loved, and I love seeing the traction it's getting just as a game. So I know we're playing it here at Sasa as well on Fridays for Archeo
Mm.
Gaming. I'm gonna switch QR codes for a bit for some shameless Sasa promotion if
Oh,
people are
it's good. The
into
team here is so nice. They're so fun to watch.
Our next one is September 15th, so this Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Any plans? I know sometimes you jump in on our streams. Any plans on you playing Stray Gods with our?
Oh, I will if I can. I'll be there if I can, but I don't know. It's just going to depend how Friday goes.
Totally fair.
But as long as they don't get ahead of me.
So, what are your thoughts in general, I guess, on the game and how it depicts Greek myth?
I'm really impressed. They put a lot of work into this game, and it really shows. They have a fairly in-depth knowledge of the characters that they're portraying. They have a lot of symbology everywhere, like, you know, spoiler, I guess, for like the first 10 minutes of game. But the premise is that these Greek gods are sort of embodied in modern humans. And you can see in what they wear, in how they present, all of these pieces of Greek iconography that really match. Like, for instance, you meet a muse named Calliope, and she has an earring in the shape of a lyre. You meet, the god Apollo, and he's got a pendant in the shape of a sun. I think my favorite so far is Hermes, because he has they have just a bunch of little touches. First of all, the fact that they're non-binary makes me very happy.
Yes.
Not only in just the I like representation sense, although that too, but also because the god Hermes was often depicted as gender fluid-ish. You'll Hermes and Dionysus in particular both have that kind of they're not all one or the other sort of aspect. And so the fact that Hermes is non-binary in the game is just fantastic. But if you look at their clothing, they have the winged hat, they have winged sandals.
I've got a bigger picture of the artwork I will put up, and hopefully,
no Hermes here, but you can see.
Hermes, but we can
so you can see Apollo in the middle back with his golden locks and his tiny little sun pendant that's kind of hard to see from this angle.
Yeah.
And next to Apollo is Pan with his horns.
My personal favorite in the game so far.
Pan is very fun. And then off to the opposite side from Pan is Persephone. You can't really see it here, but Persephone has a huge pomegranate tattoo crawling up from under her shirt, and flowered vines going up her sleeves. So again, just really great on the iconography, very eye-catching, very engaging. And they really put some work into that, and I do appreciate that. And one thing that I find interesting is our main character. This comes up in some subtle ways. She doesn't actually know very much about Greek mythology, just the bare bones. And so occasionally they have her friend Freddie, who is a Greek mythology buff, make just wild references.
Which I love, because there's so much I don't know, and I end up having to go look things up sometimes.
Yeah. So in that respect, I'm just thrilled by it. And they acknowledge when they're going to deviate almost all the time. They're like, wait, I thought you were XYZ. And they'll be like, yeah, well, they made that up. They're like, yeah, we understand that's the story.
Yeah, it's just a story.
So in the tradition of Greek mythology, which was mutable and as varied as any modern comic book series, which is the analogy I like to use in my head, is well, which version of Superman are we looking at today?
Exactly.
Is this cyberpunk Wolverine, or
exactly.
which one is it? So it fits nicely in with that sort of tradition of there's an underlying core that we're all working from, but the variations spread out and we can just toy with that. I will say that they don't ignore the content warning section.
Yeah, for sure. Do
They do.
not.
They
It is
did a
there for a
great. The
reason.
designers did a great job with the content warning thing. You can actually go as detailed as you want, and like get a sense of what you're about to look at. But they do go pretty heavy. They do go pretty heavy in here.
Yeah.
One thing that I am very impressed by, like, I had no idea how they were going to make a musical.
Yes. That was
And
novel to me.
they did it. They pulled it off. Like, the songs are not great, but most of the singers are excellent. Not all. Sorry, Pan.
He tries. He
He
does his
tries.
best.
But like, like if you're not looking for like a song to sing to yourself as in the shower, like a strong musical song, it really still does give that feel of like everybody is like singing and vibing with each other, and you still get to make choices that matter, that
Yeah.
change the course of the song. And it's like, how many things did they record for this?
I know. I thought about that. Like, it's no Hamilton or anything as far as,
Yeah,
but it's still
it's
fantastic for
it's
what it is.
extremely charming is what it is. Like, it's you don't go into it, I don't think, wanting it to be, Les Mis.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
go, but you might have like a Rent or
Yeah.
something. Like,
Yeah.
it's good.
It's good.
It's
Yeah.
good.
Okay. So let's see. What is next in the pipeline for you?
Well, next up, actually coming out in 2 days, is a video on hedonism. That's going to center around the philosophical angle, but, it's one of those things that, when you say hedonism, most people are like, oh, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Like, where are we going with this? I am largely talking about Epicurus, but not entirely. I spend about a third of the video talking about Greek philosophy, and sort of the origins of hedonism and hedone, the Greek word for pleasure, and the implications of that, which are different than, when you say pleasure by itself in English, you tend to think like, very sensual, and that's not necessarily what they're talking about. Although in some cases,
Yeah.
maybe.
It can be spicy, but not always.
Right. And so, I really was struck by this sort of question of like, why do we have this sort of negative / spicy idea of what hedonism means now? And I really wanted to get into that and sort of trace it and see what it's doing.
That's a good question. Part of me, and this is my US focused self, my American self,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, of course, Puritan America can't.
Oh yeah, I got into that. I
There.
did.
Yeah.
So, if you want jokes about Comrade Epicurus and how Christofascism is ruining the world, this is the video for you. So that's coming out on Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, and again, that'll be on your YouTube and
on
Twitch?
my YouTube channel.
Just YouTube.
It will not be on Twitch. It'll just be on YouTube.
Okay. All right, cool. So if you're interested in that, go again to that YouTube link that's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So hedonism, maybe you explained a bit about what it is, but maybe for people who aren't too familiar with the concept at all, could you go into a bit more about that from an ancient standpoint?
Sure. So, the philosophy that gave hedonism its name was its central figure was a man named Epicurus. He was an Athenian, and he was a contemporary of Plato's. So he actually set up his own school in opposition to Plato's school, and he called it the Garden, which, again, to our Western ear, it's like, oh, the garden of earthly delights, like the garden, like, ding, ding, but no. The idea of hedonism for him was very much based in pleasure as a virtue, pleasure as the ultimate life well lived. To maximize your pleasure, you must minimize suffering. To maximize the pleasure in the world, you must minimize everybody's suffering. And so it's not just this, reckless abandon, just pursuing the pleasures of the moment. It's, well, if I do this now, will I be as happy tomorrow as if I didn't do this now? That kind of thinking. So it was very much based around the idea of reducing suffering in the world. In the parlance of the Vlogbrothers for the internet age, reducing world suck. And so, like, he believed that everybody should have access to this kind of approach. He allowed slaves and women, everybody, into his school, into his garden, and it was kind of like a commune.
How did that fare for him? Was there? Do we know if there was backlash? Like, I
Well,
assume
Plato didn't like him much. I'll tell you that. And it. I don't know of anything particular that went horribly, horribly wrong. But people don't trust someone who goes against the norms. We're talking about a city that not long beforehand had executed Socrates for corrupting the youth by teaching them how to think critically.
Yeah, I mean, we can't have that. Looping back to school boards.
Yeah. Told you it was related. Yeah, but like, people were much happier, and by people I mean the elite of the city, the people who had money and power, were much happier with Plato's very abstract, ideals and principles, the things that were, the utopia, which means no place, nowhere. Like, this couldn't happen, but if it did, it'd be great.
Yeah.
They were much happier with that than with a concrete movement to revolutionize how the society worked. And that's always going to be true, I think. The people in power don't want it to change, don't want it to get better. They don't want to reduce suffering for other people, because that means that they would get less of what they want.
Exactly. Their piece of the pie will be minimized.
So really, hedonism in that sense is very, very straightforwardly about loving thy neighbor, as it were, and taking pleasure in living a good life.
Mm-hmm.
It came from a long series of different philosophies that were sort of centered around, like, well, first of all, there's Socrates, who's is a looming prefiguration here, right? And Socrates was very concerned with what is best in life. What is the way to live a good life? What is virtue? What is a good person? And I think it's very interesting that two of the biggest opposing schools of thought on that were Plato's ideals, the very abstract, the very, like, let's meditate on the foibles of the soul and become philosopher kings in our own minds, and this very concrete, live for minimizing world suck. You do what you can. And those were kind of the two biggest cleaves from that. And before Socrates, we have to talk about like the Ionian philosophers who were thinking about, well, what even is the world? What is it made of? How can we influence it? How is it organized? And what is going on here at all?
Yes.
So we also get this this very sort of closer to the modern view of hedonism, the Cyrenaic school, founded by Aristippus, who was another student of Socrates. But that's over in North Africa in Libya,
Okay.
and that school is much more like enjoy yourself, indulge yourself, be present, and take pleasure where you find it. Is much less about the sort of forethought that Epicurus is talking about, and also not very much about the sort of abstracts that Plato has. So, of course, I'm reconstructing this. We, in general, are reconstructing what Aristippus actually said because Plato's writings basically wiped him out, and Plato had a terrible view of this guy. He thought that Aristippus's Cyrenaics, they didn't call it hedonism, but we surely would today. They thought Aristippus's kind of hedonism was vulgar and a betrayal of Socrates. So we get a lot of, well, how much did he actually believe of what we generally like? We know the direction, but like when your enemy is the one whose writing survives, you have to take that with a little salt.
Yeah, a little grain of salt, maybe.
I mean,
like
Plato
today,
certainly had plenty.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's about almost 6:30, and I know this was supposed to just last a half hour. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Any more upcoming projects you want to plug? Anything like that? And again, people interested, scan that QR code. Follow Zylla. It's definitely worth it.
And feel free to ask questions. I'd be happy to answer questions if you put them in chat.
Yes.
But just about what else is coming up, I'm working on. So this is a huge project, and if you go back in my videos, you'll see a couple of videos called the Ivory Tower. And this is a project about the American education system and the sort of systemic problems in it. It's probably going to be like a 9 or 10 video series, and probably each one is going to be somewhere in the 40 to 60 minute range. So I'm only tackling like the very like top level problems.
There's only so much one person can do.
But I have my introduction up, which is kind of about what education is for, like what do we want from it, and then the first like real meaty episode, which is special education. So it's all about different subsets of hierarchies of needs within our educational system. I talk about special ed and its various problems, and also about the like the gifted hierarchy and what that does. So that's there, and then upcoming, probably my next video after hedonism, well, my next video essay. So I'll probably have another Praxis Town project and several more streams before that actually happens. But my next video essay is going to be the next in the series, which is going to be about sort of public education versus private versus charter and homeschool and all of those little weirdnesses. Okay. So that's an ongoing series called The Ivory Tower, and I think it's really important.
Yes.
And I talk a lot about the ways in which education shapes our existence and our political world. So
no, that's so important, and I'll be looking forward to that stream in particular, as I have had my children in all of those types of schools, including homeschool, in my career as parent. So I'll be interested to see your take.
Yeah. That's a lot.
It is. It's a
lot. But yeah, so that's coming up. I also have plans to do some more talking about gaming and the ancient world. So been batting around this idea of doing a Seven Wonders discussion, since that has tons and tons of ancient world figures and buildings and plenty of stuff to talk about. So
Yes, for sure. Okay, so I think we're about to wrap up now. I haven't seen any questions come in the chat, but that's okay. I was happy to monopolize your time as always.
I could talk forever. So.
My children might come and argue with us soon. They need dinner. So, all right, I'm going to end the stream. To everyone watching, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely as always.
Streams, of course. And don't forget to check out our Archeo Gaming. Check out some more Stray Gods this Friday at 2 p.m. on Twitch. And thank you.